What's up, study crew, or should I say, study squad? It's good to be here. Let's go ahead and talk about that cumulative final exam that we have coming up. Let's get right down to it. Hey, right away, I just want to start by saying no calculators. Don't even. This isn't even a bad thing. You've done no calculators on exams leading up to now, so you're like, hey, that doesn't even faze me. In fact, if anything, I'm just as happy as I was before you said it. So that's good. That's good. That's strong. When is that cumulative final exam? Hey, Wednesday. Wednesday, you know it as May 12th. You know it's 11:45. Still technically the AM. You know that is Eastern time because we are in Buffalo, New York. And if you're not in Buffalo, New York, pretend like you are and make sure that you're working on Eastern time too, even though you wouldn't be if you're in a different time zone, but make that conversion. Make sure you're showing up when you're supposed to be. And not going to be super long as far as finals go. It's going to be a 2-hour final that we've got blocked. Got to show up at 11:45 a.m. though. Can't show up later. Got to show up at 11:45 a.m. 2 hours, or until you're done. I think you're going to be done a lot sooner than that. So just letting you know, it's not that traditional 3-hour monster final. We just got a 2-hour baby kitten final. Nothing crazy. But okay, so now that all the sort of the logistics are out of the way, let's talk about material. It's a cumulative final exam, so I'm just going to start by saying that it is on everything. But I want to try to direct your studying a bit better than saying everything, because everything is an entire semester. And yeah, that can be very, very sort of apprehending to think about, but I think we can do it a little bit better. I think we can cut it down a bit, and hopefully this gives you a good idea as to where to start studying. So, let's talk. Get a fresh sheet here. We're going to go through the chapters. Before doing this, though, I just want to mention we have not had an exam on Chapter 7 material yet. So you can guarantee Chapter 7 stuff is going to show up on that exam. Yeah, so Chapter 7 is a done deal. But let's go through everything chronologically, and let's talk about what would be a good place to start studying. And I'm going to just start by saying you want to be comfortable with everything that we've done, but let me see if I can give you some ideas as to where to start your studying. And let's see if we can make it seem a little bit less intense. Chapter 1. Chapter 1 has a lot of stuff in it, but what's nice about Chapter 1 is that this is our introduction to the course, and a lot of these important key terms and important computations are things that we have been using ever since the start. So when going back through those sections, you'll say, well, we've been solving matrix systems, we've been solving homogeneous systems, we've been using parametric vector form of solutions, we've been working with span, we've been doing fully reduced or echelon forms. So it's maybe not the most important thing to revisit, but it is the start of our journey. But we've just been using all of this stuff up until now, so all of this should hopefully be fresh. Chapter 1 is worth that revisit, but no matter what you're doing, you're going to be revisiting all of this material in the later chapters, in the later sections. So this is something that if you want to return back to the basics, back to the definitions, you can go to Chapter 1. But otherwise, I'm just going to say, you do want to know all of it. But you've made it this far in the course. If you've been successful so far, there's no way that you've been successful without knowing all of Chapter 1. So likely, you're already thinking, well, Chapter 1, we're a bit beyond that, and we've been keeping it in tow all along. In particular, a good standout section, if you are looking to revisit Chapter 1, what would maybe be a good sort of bang for your buck? I would say linear transformations. We remember that was section 1.8. And that's not saying don't study or look at the rest of it, but if you're looking for a good idea to sort of start that process of revisiting Chapter 1, or if you're looking for, a good standout or the teacher's pick of what to look at, I think section 1.8 was in particular an exciting one that would be good to take a look at. Then we have Chapter 2. Well, let's see. I can do this in yellow. You like the yellow chalk. I like the yellow chalk. It's a stylus. But I want this all to blur together, so we'll alternate some colors here. Chapter 2 in baby blue. Chapter 2, again, this is still sort of part of the introduction. We didn't really get into some heavy linear algebra stuff until a little bit later on. But with Chapter 2, know how to compute inverses. And, of a 2x2 matrix and larger matrices. Remember, we have this nice closed form for finding the inverse of a 2x2 matrix. Make sure you're familiar with that. We have a different process for finding inverses for larger matrices, where we augment with the appropriate same-sized square identity matrix and go through row replacement to get there. So make sure you're comfortable with knowing how to compute inverses. And then at the end of Chapter 2, we started talking about subspaces and dimension and rank. And if you're looking for some awesome sections to consider revisiting, I think sections 2.2 and 2.3, which I sort of grouped together a bit, because they sort of continue on to each other, talking about inverses and stuff like that. Remember, section 2.1 was just matrix operations, so just getting comfortable with that, but we've been doing matrix operations throughout. And then talking about subspaces and dimension and rank, that really is a continued conversation, so I grouped these sections together as well, 2.8 and 2.9. Which brings us to Chapter 3. Chapter 3, I think, was a really fun chapter. I hope you enjoyed Chapter 3 as well. From Chapter 3, know how to compute determinants. And be aware what the different row operations do to the determinant, and how we would have to do damage control after the fact to actually find the true determinant. Remember, if you're interchanging two rows, you're flipping the sign on the determinant. If you're scaling a row, you're scaling the determinant by that same non-zero scalar. But if you remember from the videos, row replacement is a safe move to make because it preserves the determinant. But if you are going to use these other row operations, and sure, go ahead and do it if you want to, just keep in mind the effects that they have on the determinant. Know how to compute determinants overall. Be mindful of what you're doing. Chapter 3, if we remember, we want to know how to use Cramer's rule. That was a method using determinants to solve systems. And in that same section, we'll talk about sections in a bit, know how to find an inverse using the adjugate matrix, or sometimes referred to as the classical adjoint. So be comfortable computing determinants. We talked a lot about that, a long conversation on computing determinants. Know how to solve systems using Cramer's rule. Know how to find an inverse using the adjugate matrix. And then a special shout out to the sections that were, contributing there. And really all of it's important. But if you're just looking for a place to start studying, I think section 3.2 and section 3.3 are great for this. this. Section 3.1 really built into 3.2, but assuming you're comfortable with computing determinants, I think just refreshing on the later section is probably fair, for sure. And even if you're just looking at Cramer's rule, hey, we're still computing determinants for Cramer's rule. So you could really streamline your studying pretty nicely if you're keeping that in mind. Which brings us to Chapter 4. Chapter 4, give us more. Chapter 4 is a very important chapter. Right, so I'm just going to start by saying, know pretty much all of this. But what's nice about Chapter 4 that can maybe make this seem a little less threatening is Chapter 4 was really revisiting Chapter 2 and embellishing on those ideas. So this is part of a journey that we started in Chapter 2. And when we actually did the lecture material from Chapter 4, a lot of it had a bit of repetition to it. There was some new things that we talked about. We're learning, right? We're growing as linear algebra students and enthusiasts. However, Chapter 4 wasn't brand new information. Chapter 4 built on the foundation of Chapter 2, and a lot of the examples were familiar, and then some new stuff along the way. So for Chapter 4, you really want to know all this stuff. Important to remember, though, that it is a bit of a revisit of Chapter 2. And we started talking about not just subspaces, but we started talking about vector spaces as well. Then we introduced some new ideas for subspaces, adding to our list of favorite subspaces. We already had column space and null space from Chapter 2, but then we got to build on that with row space. And some good sections to take a look at for Chapter 4. I think some good sections were sections 4.1 and 4.2, I would kind of group together. Section 4.4 was very nice, talking a lot about beta coordinate vectors. And section 4.6 was a really good end to the chapter where we were talking about rank, dimension again. We were actually talking about row space. Now, you've heard my disclaimer about row space from 4.6 a bit. And if you're looking back on that video for section 4.6, I've written a bit about that in the description too, and I've linked to a couple of other videos. But just remember, when you're building a basis for row space, you want to do that from at least an echelon form of the matrix, not the original matrix. And I give a good example as to why that can fail, why that's not a good move to make. And if you'd like, you could just do the fully reduced row echelon form. Likely, if you're finding a basis for the null space, you have to bring the matrix all the way to the fully reduced row echelon form anyways. And then from there, you can start picking for your basis for the row space. Lily wants to remind you, tell him, Lily. Lily's trying to tell you, hey, you're building a basis for the row space. First of all, good luck. It's a good move to make. But when you're doing it, don't build the basis from the original matrix. Don't you dare. Do it from the echelon form of the matrix at least, or the fully reduced or echelon form is good. You don't want to do it from the original matrix. You don't, right? Keep that in mind. Remember this. Remember that Lily was the one who told you. She wants to see you succeed. So hey, don't let us down. Don't let us down. Don't let us down. I'll let you down. Just hang out. Hanging out. See you later. Okay. There's more chapters to talk about. Chapter 5. Go ahead and get the green light for Chapter 5. Chapter 5, another very important chapter. We can really sort of bring this down into two ideas for the chapter. Know how to diagonalize matrices and know how transformations and mappings come into play. Now, there's really, I think, two sections that I would highlight out of Chapter 5 for being the most useful for studying this. And that would be Section 5.3 and Section 5.4. And I can tell you why. Section 5.4 has a lot of these very interesting examples talking about transformations and functions and mappings and how they come into play with the material for the chapter. Section 5.3 gives us that start on diagonalization. However, we're missing then 5.1 and 5.2. Well, why is that okay? Well, 5.1 and 5.2 were the start of our discussion on eigenvalues and eigenvectors. And although that material is very important, we have been working with eigenvalues and eigenvectors and the characteristic polynomial and the characteristic equation regularly ever since this chapter. So if you're comfortable with that stuff already, and if you're comfortable with Section 5.3 and Section 5.4, likely you're already comfortable with finding an eigenvalue, building an eigenvector. So you might not need to revisit that foundational material because you're already using that and applying it. And we can sort of touch up on those things along the way. We probably don't have to go all the way back to the earliest discussion of it, considering we've been doing this. What's really nice about Chapter 5 is that not a lot of stuff even to study here, right? And even when you think about Section 5.3 and diagonalization of matrices, we have been doing that still in the course. We're still talking about now orthogonal diagonalization, but we're doing it with our current material in Chapter 7. We're still doing it. So this is stuff that not only have we been recently tested on it, so it's very fresh, but it's also stuff that we're still in fact doing and using. So there's not too much to say here. Section 5.4 is always worth a revisit. Very cool examples there. Lots of fun stuff going on. Think about that as, some exciting part to your studying. Which brings us to another very recent set of material. We have Chapter 6. You remember Chapter 6. Chapter 6 is fresh out of the oven for us. There's a lot of things in Chapter 6 to know for the final, to keep in mind. But let's go ahead and talk a bit about what those things are. Orthogonal projections, distances, orthogonal decomposition, the best approximation theorem, Gram-Schmidt process, and least squares method. And that's not to mention other things that we do need to be comfortable with. Remember, I'm not giving a complete list for all of this stuff. I'm just trying to target what I think are going to be the most important things that you might want to focus your studying on. But in order to be successful with these things, we have to understand how the dot product works. We have to be comfortable with building unit vectors. We have to be comfortable with these computations. And that stuff was mentioned at the beginning of the chapter. So if this is stuff that you don't feel comfortable with at all, you are likely going to want to revisit the first couple of sections. But you need those tools for all of these later sections. So if I'm going to give my shout out to any of the sections from Chapter 6, I think that the most of your studying can really focus on Section 6.3, Section 6.4, and Section 6.5. We've had our most recent assessments on these sections. So I think that this should be, although it is a bit of a longer list comparatively, I think that these things are the freshest, which is good for us. Which brings me to the end of our list. I'm going to turn back to yellow chalk. We have Chapter 7. Now, Chapter 7, I said at the very beginning, we haven't been tested on this yet, so you know it's going to be on the cumulative final exam. I'm just going to say it louder. for everyone. Chapter 7. We haven't tested on this yet. We're going to test on this. You know then, this is going to show up on the cumulative final. Chapter 7 stuff is going to be on there. So I'm going to leave it at this. No, all of it. You already know walking into that final exam. You don't know what the questions are going to be on that final exam, but you know the Chapter 7 stuff is definitely going to be on there, without a doubt. And what are the sections? Well, section 7.1 and 7.2, which I like to group together. I'll talk about why in just a minute. And then section 7.4. Now, section 7.1 and 7.2 start by talking about diagonalization of symmetric matrices, talks about the spectral theorem, all of these wonderful things from our course, which leads us into 7.2, where we use all of the tools from 7.1 to now classify quadratic forms and to have a discussion there on our principal axis theorem. So these two really group together. You can think of 7.2 really as an extension of 7.1. So when you're going through and studying, 7.2 is really going to be I think the bigger of the two. 7.1 set us up for success in 7.2. But since we haven't had assessments on this yet, I'm just going to say, hey, all of it, and these are the only 3 sections for Chapter 7 that we're discussing, so very important. And section 7.4 has to be a fan favorite. Singular value decomposition, SVD, love it. So these are some of the important things to be comfortable with. We have our spectral theorem, diagonalization of symmetric matrices. We have classifying quadratic forms, still working with symmetric matrices, but now thinking about our principal axis theorem, and singular value decomposition, our favorite matrix factorization that we could possibly have. Works for any matrix, does not have to be square, it can be rectangular. We've had quite a bit of discussion on Chapter 7 right up until now. You know it's going to be on that final exam. So you know you're at a disadvantage if you're not studying for it, and you know that it's going to be worth your time and advantageous, definitely, to cover this material. And that's really sort of at the end of it, right? So it looks a bit like a long list. What I think can be helpful is when you start your studying, you can start by glancing over these sections. You have those blank student notes, you have the lecture videos. You can sort of start by maybe surveying the situation. I won't say, skimming, because it means different things to different people, what it means to skim a document or a video. But you can just sort of, re-involve yourself with that section, and you right away will probably get a feeling as to whether or not it's something that's comfortable or uncomfortable. If you're comfortable with, let's say, linear transformations from section 1.8, you'd say, okay, well, I want to study this. Maybe I won't start here. Maybe I'll do it in between some other studying, and maybe I'm not going to spend as much time studying on it because it's already comfortable. I might only have to do a little bit of, work with it to get it back to where it was. Where maybe we're talking about things like computing inverses. Maybe we don't really feel super comfortable with that. Maybe we kind of didn't really involve ourselves with that material when it first showed up. We didn't do super great on inverses on the assessments. Well, so now maybe I want to devote a little bit more time and dedication to talking about inverses and using that as a good point for studying. Maybe that's where I want to focus a bit more time. Maybe that's where I want to start studying too. But you'll be able to tell as you go through. Even as I'm talking to you right now, as I went through and made this list, you probably were remembering, yeah, that was comfortable. I got that, no problem. Am I going to look it over? Of course. But is it going to be, the pith and marrow of my studying? Maybe not. Or maybe you were thinking, oh yeah, I remember of that stuff. Talking about vector spaces and beta coordinate vectors, but it didn't really feel great to me the first time around. Now's my chance to re-involve with that material and get comfortable with it and have one last shot perhaps at it. And then we have a good chunk of this material is stuff that we've already been studying most likely, and so that should be very minimal upkeep. We just want to, it's already fresh, we want to keep it fresh. And of course, you heard me say Chapter 7, gotta have it. Love it, gotta have it. So you know what to expect then. Hey, I hope this has been helpful for you. Don't think for a second that I'm not there with you when you're studying. If you need anything, you know where to find me. Let me know how your studying's going. Send me a message, send me an email. If things are going great, let me know that things are going great. If you're feeling good, let me know you're feeling good. If things aren't going great, let me know. Let me know what you're struggling with. Let me know how you're feeling. Let me know what you want to talk about. Let me know what I can clarify for you. Right? We have this last cumulative final exam. I think you can do really, really well on it. In fact, I know you're capable of this. You've been with me on this journey all the way through. Towards the end of our semester, you can do this. I know it. You can get a 100. And the usual study stuff, it's never too early to start studying. Never too early to start studying. Start studying now. If you haven't started studying already, start now. If you've already started studying, hey, nice. And I think it's normal to sometimes get a little bit stressed out. Final exams, cumulative ones can feel a little uneasy at times, but that doesn't mean that we can't move towards a goal. That doesn't mean that we can't perform to the best of our abilities. You know you're capable of this. You know you're the best. But if you feel yourself starting to get a little stressed out, we're just doing our deep breathing exercises, right? I think the jury's still out on the best way to do the deep breathing exercises. But, however you've breathed before, you're great at it. So just, take that sort of time to just, relax. With relaxing, you can get those therapeutic exercises in, just feeling good, feeling fine, and then we take a break, we move on, we study some more. And important to make sure that you're taking some breaks every now and again. Study marathons are fun, but you want to make sure that you're stepping away from studying now and again in order to consolidate material. And that's the opportunity to build those neural pathways, to strengthen those retrieval cues. It's always good to study before going to bed as well, and then wake up and study a little bit. You can do that for just a little bit. You're going to actually see some really good results from that too. Taking those breaks, studying, take a break, step away from it, come back to it. That's how we end up consolidating material. It's going to be really good for you. Hey, I've been talking for a while now. I think that's all I have to say. Good luck. We wish you good luck from here. You mean that? There we go. Cat Squad. I gotcha. It took a while. It was difficult for me. So I should study pointing and looking at a mirrored image of myself. But we're here to help you. The cat babies and I are around to help you. Let us know what you need help with. Let us know what you're working on. And keep us in mind. And keep your wits about you. And anyways, I will see you soon. Good luck to everyone on the study squad. And I will see you next time for that final exam. Keep me in the loop with your studying. Definitely take care of yourselves. Hey, remember, no matter where you are and what you're doing, always keep learning, keep dreaming, follow your heart. See you soon. Take care.